7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello, welcome to Random Offense on Two-Way. I am Ethan Strauss. This is my show. That is my producer, Trace Crutchfield, over there, who you are also seeing live. I am very happy to take your questions later. That's one of the reasons I wanted to do this. For those who do not know, I have a Substack. I cover sports, media, business, culture, politics, whatever. And I do it from the perspective of being more in that gray area. So one of the reasons why I wanted to do this, I really like what Mark Halperin does with his Two-Way channel. Some of you know who he is, some of you do not. I think a lot of you know if you came via the Two-Way channel. Mark has been absolutely brilliant about expanding the conversation and getting perspectives that you don't usually hear in media. And so when I saw that and I saw what he was capable of, saw what he could do, it's something that I wanted to do here. Trace, can you give them maybe a good rundown as a Two-Way veteran of all Mark does and why he's so good with it?
Well, I would say that he's just practiced at dialoguing with people and he's patient at talking with people. I think that's something that you have in common. He's had a lot of practice talking about politics and he's real comfortable in that world of those discussions. I mean, I don't know how expansive his wheelhouse of things to talk about is, but he's just good at talking to people. He's genuinely interested in listening to what they say.
I think that's a really good way to view it. And I think that's something that really appealed to me. It appealed to me in this really genuine way where, there's such programmatic ways of discussing all these issues in politics and people have their different sides. And Mark really showed me this different way of doing it where you would actually get a portal into the American voter and you would see what they were actually thinking. It was idiosyncratic. It didn't map on at all to my expectations. And when I saw that, I thought it's something that I could do here. It's something I could do with sports culture. We've got legacy media. There's a certain formula. We've got some partisan backlash against the way they do it. I'm here in a way to have a different conversation and have something a little bit less predictable. And the way I get that, I think, Trace, is by getting the audience involved. And they're going to inform what we do. One of the reasons why I love the phrase random offense, it's something that Andre Iguodala told me in the locker room when I was covering the Golden State Warriors. He said the hardest offense to stop is random offense. It's the hardest one. I think that there's going to be a controlled chaos element here and that you, the audience, are going to bring the randomness. That's my hope anyway. And speaking of somebody who is brilliant in controlled chaos, Bomani Jones, veteran broadcaster, host of The Right Time, somebody who, he's just got these bizarre, idiosyncratic talents. A man, by rumor, who has hosted radio programs while doing Wordles or cross words or whatever else, Bomani. It's a legend. I don't know. I wasn't there, but I heard people were very impressed. How you doing, man?
I am very good. It was the New York Times crossword puzzle on an iPad. It is a very, very true statement. I would never tell the guy that I was interviewing at the time that happened, though. He would be really offended. It was actually a fairly inappropriate time for me to be out here doing parlor tricks, but it had to be done.
Oh, it's quite an impressive parlor trick. And, I've played a little bit of a trick on you, I feel like. I feel, I should have been open with you about this. There's this whole topic right now out there about the hunt for the liberal Joe Rogan, the hunt for the Democrats, Joe Rogan. There was an article written by Teddy, I think, is it Schleifler? I apologize, Teddy. A lot of people would say that he's one of the best right now at breaking news about mega donors and political infrastructures and shadowy groups. And he had one recently. There's a lot of money flying around behind the scenes because a lot of people in the Democratic establishment feel as though they've been out-messaged. They've been elbowed out of the way by Joe Rogan. They've lost a connection point with young men, and they're looking for some sort of counter. And when I read the article, I was blown away by the money involved. And Bomani, I'm not saying that's going to be you necessarily, but if you were doing a casting call, you'd have to make that phone call. And so that's a topic that I want to discuss. But I also want to discuss another topic that we might begin with, which is that the New York Times speaking of Joe Rogan, wrote another article that you were quoted in that Stephen A. Smith is the new Joe Rogan, or at least aspiring to be, if he doesn't aspire to be president instead. So that's a lot. I've been monologuing a while, but I want to talk about this whole idea of Stephen A. Smith as president, an idea that is not being dismissed as crazy, an idea that these mega donors appear to be intrigued by. And you made this point, Bomani, as your jumping off point. What's so interesting is if you were to suggest that Stephen A., instead of being president, should be named coach of the New York Knicks, it would be laughed out of the room, but somehow this is not. Bomani, what do you make of this? You were quoted in this article.
So it is worth noting that when I was called for that article, it was not at all about Joe Rogan. All they talked to me about was the idea of Stephen A. Smith as being president. And then somewhere along the way in this editorial process, and I want to say I talked to the guy like 2 or 3 weeks ago, like it wasn't that recent. But somewhere in the editorial process, it turned into this idea of turning into Joe Rogan. Now, the president part, I mean, look, that dude that's the president in the Ukraine became the president in the Ukraine because he was the president in the Ukraine on TV first, right? Like I just want to make it clear, we're not the only idiots in the world. And that's not to say that man, he may have been wildly qualified to be the president. He seems to, at the very least, be doing a good job of looking the part. I have no idea. I'm just saying we're not the only people susceptible to these sorts of things. I was just reading, I forget which book it was by Neil Postman. It was one of these that's more directly related to like the idea of education. And his whole thing, he talks about with the encroachment of television into our lives, that we will reach a point where a prerequisite for running for political office at a national stage is going to be previous celebrity derived from television. And this seems to be a culmination of that, right? Like that's what Trump had over all the guys that he ran against starting in 2016, but that he was way more famous than the rest of them. The thing that makes Stephen A. Smith attractive, I think, to a lot of these Democratic donors is that he's way more famous than the rest of the people that he is running against, which will have nothing to do with whether or not you can do a good job of being the coach of the Knicks, right? But what these people are looking for is not somebody who could be good at being president, because this is an ironic part of all of this. It's somebody who will be good at winning the presidency. And then you think that you can go from there. And so if all you're looking for is somebody to win, then what you're looking for is somebody that can win a television contest. And so not many people are going to beat Stephen A. at a television contest. I don't think I can beat him at a television contest. And that's how we wind up with this truly nonsensical discussion that even he seems to find to be a bit nonsensical, but he can't walk away from it. Why would you? There's so much that you can gain from entertaining this.
Indeed.
Yeah, Sam, could you play the clip of him on ABC News with Jonathan Carl? It's great. I mean, I think it sounds great.
It's peak Stephen A. Let's see it.
I would hope somebody else would step up that's more qualified than me. But if it has to come down to me, it is something I would consider. Yes, I would. Because I don't mind the thought of tussling with these folks at all, on the left or the right. All of them disgust me, to be quite honest with you.
I love it. It's a different spin on the Donald Trump 2016, what do you have to lose? It's similar to that, but it's different. Instead, it's, I guess it's fallen to me. That's really the approach of it, that we are in such dire straits, ladies and gentlemen. I don't think I'm even qualified for this. I don't even think it should be me, but damn it, I've just got to be the hero because nobody else is going to step up to do it. That seems to be his message. Now, the idea that we're not the only idiots in going for reality stars, TV stars, it might just be that the American people conceive of the job as different, and maybe they're correct. Maybe the job of president is conceivably more of a communications job than whatever we conceived of it as when we were growing up as kids. That's plausible to a certain degree. I think you're a little more bullish on the potential of Stephen A. than I am. I'm still in that place, though, Bomani, where I can't dismiss it as something that could happen. But I feel as though Trump tapped into an issue set in 2016. There was a market inefficiency. And I think that the issue aspect, platform aspect of Trump is a little bit underplayed by people who don't like those issues. But immigration was something that was resonant in the way that he went after it to win those primaries. I don't know if Stephen A has the issues. Do you think he needs the issues, or do you think that we're post issues right now?
I don't think, I think that the people who pay the most attention to this stuff, who are by and large the consumers that drive the media cycle, I think that those people probably care about what we would term the issues more than perhaps the median voter does. Like, I think that's a fair hypothesis to throw out there. Right now, though, I do think Stephen A has an issue that he's thrown out that I think has been very successful, and is the reason why we're here, which is, don't you hate the Democrats? That is the bipartisan issue. Like the thing that I think Trump tapped in on immigration, and I think it became much clearer in the 24 election truly than it was in the 2016 election, because in the 2016 election, it just felt a little racist to a lot of people. By 24, I think it was truly a bipartisan issue, right? The idea that something has to be done about this. That was something that I think across the board people believed, right? You have the Democratic mayor, now look, Adams is his own piece of work in New York, but this became a very germane issue to him. And if you walk the streets of New York City, you could understand something changed in terms of the population of immigrants and the people who were able to come. And not everybody was okay with it. I'm not talking about whether their feelings are right or wrong. I'm talking about just strictly what the issue happened to be. And so I think one of our mistakes with Trump is that we evaluate him as though he's playing some sort of three-dimensional chess, and I don't think that's necessarily true. Trump got some people behind him who I think figured some things out. Is it possible that Stephen A. Smith get some people behind him that can figure him out? Yes. I think where the difference is between where you and I stand is I do think it's somewhat implausible, the idea that Stephen A. Smith right now could win the presidency, but the idea that it could be a thing, right, that it could truly be compelling, I'm not out on that idea, because if you would have asked me in this time or a month before, April, we'll call it April 2016. April 2016, I went to Paris to interview Ta-Nehisi Coates for the Playboy interview. And he did not even want to entertain any questions about Trump because it was such an implausible idea that he would become the president. And as I'm hearing him, I didn't think that was crazy or escapist for him to do. I was like, hey, man, got to stand on principle. Okay. And then next thing you know, you look up, and this thing ain't no joke no more.
Yeah, no, I can't dismiss it. Yeah, I can't dismiss it. And I also think that Trump winning has opened up a bit of why not meism from a lot of different people. A lot of people now.
Or there are no rules. That is the part that I think it opened up is there are no rules, right? Scandal, there's no such thing anymore as a political scandal, right? We just had something. I mean, I think Gary Hart, I think he's dead, but if he was alive, he had to be up in 2016 like, bruh, what are you talking about?
Infidelity.
Right? Like this is all it takes. I mean, like for me, that's all it took. And look, he was like handsome and people thought he could actually be the president. Trump people were somewhat terrified of. It didn't work. So like scandal as an idea is gone. A legitimate convicted felon, that one's off the board, right? What is there to tell literally anybody with a platform and a profile in the United States that you can't be the president? Or at least why can't we entertain the idea?
No, I think being entertaining, it might even be a prerequisite going forward. Now, you said, I'm trying to remember what the quote was in the New York Times, something about how it might be a television contest and Stephen A's got more reps than anybody. It might be a podcast contest, though, going forward. I feel like with Stephen A, it might be that the water, what's the metaphor I'm looking for? That the water is spread wide, but it might not be that deep. I don't know if he connects to any particular issue in that kind of strong way. Maybe I'm naive when it comes to the median voter, but I do think the issue set matters. I don't think you get there just on the basis of being entertaining. I see what you're saying, that he found this uniting issue of frustration with the Democrats, but I'm not sure if that's going to get you through a Democratic primary, that people are just frustrated with the party in general. That seems like a median voter, later stage kind of issue.
Well, I think that there's a fair hypothesis to offer that the Democrats are a bit more discerning when it comes to what they expect of their candidates and the likes than the Republicans are. And I think that's kind of hard to dispute. When you kind of look at what the baseline requirements are for somebody to entertain you as a candidate on the Democratic side, I need you to hop over a few more like barriers. You know what I mean? Like, there is no, and this is not someone who is elected, but I think you'll understand what I'm saying here. There really isn't an analog to like Kid Rock hanging around on the Democratic side.
Well,
It doesn't go that way. Like there are more barriers to entry, I think, for that class of people than there are on the right. The right, I put it like this: the right's a lot less snobby about who they let in if they think the person they let in is going to help them win.
Thank you. Because I heard the pushback in my head. I heard people on the other side blanching at it. And I understood what you were getting at, that there's like a little bit of a more Harvard, a little bit more of that sensibility, because the pushback against what you were saying is that the last guy was senile and, you know, all that. I understood the core of the point that you were making. I want to approach this other thing, though, because this whole idea of the liberal Joe Rogan, the hunt for the liberal Joe Rogan, I'm surprised it's still such a meme. I'm surprised that a guy who's being floated is from our world of sports and sports media and Stephen A. And this is a whole subject. I want to explore that. I think that that's part of what we're seeing right now, is that both sides are trying to learn from each other. And when they lose, they're trying to learn. And there's this lesson that the Democratic side is taking of, we need a that guy. How do we get a that guy? What do you think? What do you think of this whole venture and how it's being prosecuted in a top-down way with these mega donors and everybody else trying to recreate their own version?
Okay, I would like to start by saying what bad lesson learners the Democrats can be, because as I recall in 2016, what they told me was, well, we need to get out here and learn something about these hard scrabble whites. And how did they suggest that we go out there to learn about these hard scrabble whites? They told us to read Hillbilly Elegy. I am convinced that the Democrats created the star of J.D. Vance. I had never heard of this dude till I read that book. And by the way, I read that book and I was floored. And the point that I made was, if a black person wrote that book about black people would burn down his house. We have words for people like that on our side. I don't know what white people call them over there, but I couldn't believe that. But the idea that Democrats read that finger-wagging nonsense that basically blamed all these people for their condition and everything else, and that's what they thought they was going to learn from, right, was to go out here and fuss at these people and tell them that they don't get it right. Like, that's crazy talk. So let's fast forward now to the Rogan thing. Let's talk about a couple of reasons why this is horrible advice. Number one, everybody says they need to find a new Joe Rogan, but I ask everyone who says that, what does that mean? Like, nobody stops and takes the step back and asks, A, what does it mean to be whatever you call the liberal Joe Rogan? And B, how did Joe Rogan become the conservative Joe Rogan when Joe Rogan himself is not a particularly ideological creature? Number three, I think is very important. I think I may have said it was only going to be two, but I'm going to keep going. Number three that I think is very important is, how many of those people who are saying we need a new Joe Rogan have actually listened to that podcast even one time? Because I'm not going to lie. I've listened to a little bit of it, but I am not a consumer of that product. Now, to me, how Joe Rogan got here is actually very interesting, very fascinating, and very tied to sports. Number one, I'm going to ask you this question.
Okay.
Do you know how long Joe Rogan has been doing that podcast?
I think it might have been since before the Obama administration.
09.
Cool. So just right
09.
around that.
He's been doing this podcast for 16 years, okay? Rogan is an early adopter on two things. I had a writer on Game Theory, a head writer first season. She made a great point about this because, you know, the comedians, they all know Joe Rogan, right?
Yeah.
She made a very important point, which is Rogan was an early adopter of two things that proved to be phenomena: podcasting and UFC. So Rogan has been in this position serving this audience that is exactly the audience that everybody keeps talking about. These disaffected white men. Not that every single fan of UFC is a disaffected white man, but oh, buddy, it's a lot of disaffected white dudes over there, right? Not only does he get in on UFC, but as the UFC thing keeps going, Dana White is basically using UFC as a Trump propaganda arm. Like, it's not subtle, right? It's very transparent, the relationship that White, who stood on stage at the 2016 Republican National Convention, and some of the material, like the actual media stuff that they put together for UFC, those things go hand in hand. So Rogan has a unique position as an onboarder for a lot of things, right? So he gets that audience, I think, not necessarily because of anything he says on his podcast, but primarily because of the exposure that they have to him from his day job. Okay. Now you get to that podcast, which has stuff all over the place, right?
Yeah.
Like I think over the years, you couldn't really give the greatest answer exactly for like, so what's the MO here of this podcast? So if like, what is the analog to something that doesn't really have a clear formed ideology? I don't know how the left is supposed to do that. And again, it took 16 years to build it up to the place where it's in. Rogan was a Bernie dude at one point, if I am not mistaken, right? The more I talk, I feel like the more you realize why the idea of we're going to find a Joe Rogan doesn't make sense. And the idea that all you have to do is throw some money at it is crazy. The idea that anybody is paying any attention to the actual business of the podcast space and thinks that you can just drop a new podcast off and all of a sudden it's going to go through the roof. No. And the reason is very simple. The infrastructure is in place for an infinite number of podcasts. There remain only 24 hours in a day.
Yeah.
And so all of us who do podcasts for a living are trying to hold on to the people we have. You think you're just about to show up and then all of a sudden like get all these people? This is the sort of thing that when people ask about whether or not the Democratic establishment is out of touch or misunderstands it, it feels to me like in sports where, for example, Victor Wembanyama.
Yeah.
He's 7'5". He's French. He does all these things. He's got a basketball game unlike anything that we have ever seen. For those of you who don't do basketball, he's truly like a 7'5" guard. And in sports, people have a tendency to look at something like that. Patrick Mahomes is another example where you look at Patrick Mahomes and you say to yourself, we got to go find us one of those. Yes, go find this thing there's one of.
Yeah.
Go find this thing that doesn't exist anywhere else in the world, but you are either A, going to find another one, or B, you're going to build one from scratch. I got news for these people. You're not going to build Joe Rogan in 3 years. It takes way more time for you to be able to do that. And so my read on it has been part of why, I guess, if you're going to look for a new Joe Rogan, you have to somewhat acknowledge that what you need to do is offer some views that are not mainstream.
Yes.
Because I do think they traffic in a lot of that. Now, from what I understand about Rogan's podcast, they also traffic in a lot of dribble, right? Like a lot of whacked out theories that nobody should ever deal with or ever have to tolerate, like come up with. No, there's a lot that's going on there. It's a 3-hour podcast. Like, you got to sift through and find out all it is. But I just feel like when I start walking through what I know that podcast to be and my understanding of it, oh, my fault. I forgot about the other part.
Oh.
No one has shown me any data to indicate that those people vote.
Yeah.
I'm just not sold on the idea that people who sit around and listen to Joe Rogan for 3 fucking hours get up and vote. I'm not sure. Maybe they do, but I'd like to see some data. Like people with this idea that at the end, Rogan said he was going to vote for Trump and now all these guys went and voted for Trump. How do you know that?
No, that might have been cause and effect being switched up or people not understanding. I also think there's an aspect to what you're saying that the people who want this don't actually consume the content and they're almost looking at the movie at the end of the movie. They notice when Joe Rogan says vote for Trump, they don't understand maybe that he was less of a politically aligned figure for years and years and years and years and years, building up credibility with his audience. And one of the ways you build up credibility or have a currency with the audience is not being controlled. People want authenticity. And so when you open up this conversation of we need someone who has credibility with the audience, a credibility that can be acquired, I think, through seeming not controlled, and that means giving opinions that are off script or maybe unexpected, and then we need to control that guy or girl for our own ends. I don't know how that can conceivably work. It just seems like you're trying to make something that's fundamentally organic in nature happen in this astroturfed way that betrays, yes, as you were talking about, out of touch, it betrays a certain lack of faith or cynical view of people that is too cynical even for me. I can be persuaded that people aren't geniuses or the average person isn't a genius, maybe. I can get that perspective, but I don't think people are like this, where you present something to them that they can smell is false and they're going to want it in their ears on long drives. I just can't see that happening.
Well, you obviously running game on these people, because all you're talking about is we got to find a person to get this across to them, as opposed to what seems to be most necessary is a real assessment about the package that you are offering to people, which is a package that people seem to be rejecting, right?
Yeah.
Now, this is my read, no matter what side of the aisle you're on, and this to me is a thing that Trump tapped into, and I guess it's under the broad heading of populism. But to me, if you do not identify that the core problem for the median American is what corporations have done and continue to do to us, and the fact that what I think is very different about this Democratic Party versus, call it 40 years ago, maybe even 30 years ago, is the relationship that it has with the corporate structure and with that money, okay? And so if everybody is playing for the same money, it becomes difficult in tangible, on the ground ways for people to differentiate between the two parties. Now, are the parties different? Very, right? And I'm a Black person, so the ways that they are different land much differently over here. They're much more germane here with me, because a lot of it becomes about these social issues that I think are very, very important, and that for white people, it just kind of, hey, it goes either way, right? I see the difference. But if you look at what happened with income inequality and all these other things, I understand the argument that somebody could make, particularly these disaffected whites that people love to talk about. I see why they don't necessarily see what the difference is. The way that this party, to me, needs to establish that it is different is to truly attack the economic situation that is terribly affecting so many people in this country, right? There are so many people who I do think look at as things go and are like, so how am I supposed to get by with this? And if you can't answer that question for them, not I hear you, but let me show you something else, right? That, I think, is the fundamental. It's the Jim Carville, it's the economy stupid idea. But if your party leadership isn't negatively affected by the status quo, then you're not going to encourage somebody who talks about disrupting that status quo. And that is what Trump sold.
Yeah.
We are going to well, hold on. Trump sold two things. We're going to disrupt the status quo, and we going to bring back the old status quo when it comes to all this race and woke stuff.
I mean, there is a lot with the Trump branding. I don't want to get too digressive. There was a strange thing with his successful third campaign of marrying the past America to future America and the tech right. It was almost like the past and the future in a coalition against the present is how I conceived of that campaign. And it worked successfully. But I think, I don't know if it's the elephant in the room, but the big driver in all of this is the loss of young men. And maybe, because I said I would get you for 15 minutes, or we start talking and it starts going. So you just let me know when you've got to go. I think it's the loss of young men that has the Democratic Party rattled. That's what I see. Because for so long, there was this idea of the youth vote. It wasn't the male vote and the female vote with the youth. It was the youth vote. And when I was young, Obama was this big thing that resonated with young men. Millennials, really, not all of them, obviously, but if we're talking in generalities, he was a big deal to millennials. The Democrats did not have a problem with young men. That was not a thing. And now you're seeing this massive shift, this over 20-point shift in that cohort of people younger than myself. And it's not just disaffected whites, it's across the board. Different demographics of men are not into this party. Do I think that Joe Rogan says jump and all of America's young men ask how high and vote for whoever he tells them to vote for? No. But I think there's something to Trump appearing on all these podcasts that young men like to listen to. And it's just all part of this whole dynamic. So I see what you're saying about how the economics, the anti-corporate, that's something that the Democrats are struggling to channel right now. But it also seems like they might have to moderate on some social issues, because there's just something with young men right now that they appear to find unappealing about the Democratic Party and how they're just simply messaging and what they stand for.
Well, I mean, the internet has done a number on these young fellas. The structural shifting of the economy has also done a number. Look, man, not everybody good at school. That was not always a requirement for making a decent living, right?
Yeah.
If you're not good at school, and look, I'm good at school, right? I ain't have to try that hard. It worked out very well for me. If you're not good at school, man, I don't know what's coming for you, right? But I think that, yes, the messaging and those things you talk about, again, the internet part becomes very important there. And I don't know how you crack that code. I don't know how you get
Well,
beyond.
I'm saying more like, I'll give you an example. When I was watching some of Kamala's events, there were "The future is female" or "Trust women" was this banner. And
Yes.
I like women. I'm not against trusting a woman, but there is something to that message where you could argue that that's not explicitly saying don't trust men, but it did seem like the party became pitched
Yes.
to one side.
Okay, so you raise an interesting question there. And this is something that I think about and look at for a bunch of stuff, which is, and this, I think about this in the terms of race generally, but I think gender is also another part of it, right? So when I did my show for HBO, the first episode, we did a thing about why is it that black people hate Duke basketball? And it ultimately landed on the idea that those white dudes were beating the hell out of the teams that we loved, right? Like, I really looked at it in Duke basketball. Every team that we ever loved, they beat them all on national television in front of the whole world, right? It was a pretty funny thing, I think. We put together a whole museum with jokes. Jalen Rose even showed up. You know, we did all this stuff. And a group of people that I had worked with that I thought of the world of, mostly middle-aged to older white dudes, did not realize it was a piece of comedy. And the point that they made was that, well, most white people, they can't find the joke when you mention race. Like, it all shuts down. There is, I think, an indisputable level of sensitivity that the groups that are in the positions of privilege have when you start doing something that deviates from the world that they know and understand, right? There is an argument that is an obligation for the party on the left to fight against that. However, if fighting against that creates a problem for the ultimate goal of winning the election, what exactly are you supposed to do? Now, in theory, a two-party electoral system is supposed to moderate everything and bring everything to the center to make it go. What is kind of frustrating about being on the left is that it never feels like the right has to moderate anymore. It feels like they have a gain, and Trump being an example of it, of going even farther and farther to the right. And so there is an understandable impulse from people who run a campaign like Kamala Harris's, for example, to say, no, we're going to push back, and we need to get them to understand that it's okay to vote for a woman. But is it possible for you to do it with the messaging they're doing? Probably not. Well, how do you make it possible? I don't have the answer for that. Obama kind of avoided race unless it was absolutely impossible, right? He did the Philadelphia speech, and that didn't even work. They weren't even happy with that one, right? And they was like, oh, okay, cool. Well, we just gonna have to leave this alone. If you read Game Change, for example, it talks a lot about Obama being in there like, guys, I'm black. We don't have to hide from it. And the white guys are like, trust us, we know white people better than you do. That's basically what they were saying. Maybe that's a part of it that comes into it for the Democrats. That's the thing that Carville talks about, is we have lost these guys. What the Democrats are trying to figure out is how you can approach those people without compromising what you consider are your fundamental principles. My argument is the way that you did reach those people in the past was through economics. I just don't know that you're going to convince me that there's another way to do it. If we're talking about the idea if you find a new Joe Rogan, what is the overlap of the Democratic Party and Joe Rogan? Said it earlier. It's Bernie Sanders. Like, it's a fair question to ask. And so to me, I think all of those things get fixed if those young men, yeah, the internet has got them. They've got, you know, there are a lot of views socially that I think that run counter to what the Democrats talk about. I do think a lot of them bristle at the idea of, you know, trust women and stuff like that. I also think a lot of young boys going to see their parents, their grandparents with serious problems with healthcare and unable to get it, dying horrible deaths, right? I'd like to think that those things are going to land. Not that I want that to happen, obviously, but that those things would land with them more than what Joe Rogan is talking about on a podcast. Well, how are you going to be the alternative to what the status quo is when that stuff happens? That, to me, remains what you need to do instead of trying to find these quick fixes. But they don't want to do that, right? They're more about mischief than anything approaching a revolution.
I mean, I don't know how to solve that problem for them necessarily. And that's what's interesting about it. I mean, I think most presidencies end in disappointment and open up an opportunity for the other side. And that's even divorced from whatever Trump is or whatever he's going to be in this term. Most presidencies in the modern era don't go that well. And if you're trying to win an election afterwards, you're going to have an opportunity to do so. But as far as the problem for them about the young men, I don't know how to solve that for them. I don't know, Bomani, if there's a policy. It's just a feeling. It's just a flavor. It's just something about the Democratic Party is just not resonating. And it's funny, I don't know if Stephen A. Smith, who, I mean, what is he? Is he around 60 years old? He's got gray in his beard. I know that much. I don't know if he's the solution to that problem either, but it seems like he's got more of a chance of at least understanding it and approaching it than some of the other people they've got at the forefront. Bomani, this has been fantastic. Is there anything, not that you need me to plug you over there at the right time, but is there anything that we should be on the lookout for?
You think I'm passing up on it? You must be crazy. The right time, the right time with Bomani Jones. You can find it where all podcasts are given away for free. You can even find it on YouTube, where apparently money is to be made. So if you just kind of want to click on there and tool around for a little bit and hit that view count, baby, I ain't gonna hold you. You know what I'm saying? You are more than welcome to go ahead and do that. But no, that's what I got, man. I appreciate, my ability to come on here with you. One time we'll have to do this on one of those things that I think you're out of your mind about,
Oh, yeah. The Nick Wright, where he shows up and he tells me I'm out of my mind. I've got a few of these things. I mean, those are the text messages that
we're going to get to those.
Well, yeah, I get those. Bomani's appropriately sensitive about it, but I'll write something controversial and I'll get one of those text messages from him and I'll go, what's the
well, you know what though? But when I send the text, I hope, this is what I hope, that I pick my spots and everything. I hope that you know that if I choose to do that, I am not simply, I don't agree with you or whatever. Something has happened that I find to be grievous. Right? I think that's the word. Like, I want you to, like, when that
makes me feel worse, Bomani.
No, because I also hit you with the, you know what? Hadn't thought about it like that.
Oh, yes.
Okay,
you do.
cool. Right, see, that's the thing, like, look, you've gone to this weird place. We love you still, like, I respect you enough that even where I'm like, I don't like some of these people you hanging out with, but I understand where you got to that, and I can't disagree with it. I want you to know that I'm the person that can acknowledge that. So that way, when I tell you that you're out of your ever-loving mind, you might be like, damn, am I in my ever-loving mind or have I left? Like, I just want you to, I want you to think that my reasonable friend might have a reasonable disagreement. I even call you to talk about it like it's 1987. You know what I'm saying?
Perfect.
I think you communicate with me in a way that is the right balance. I actually don't think you've ever been in any way. I just always wonder. I get that text message. I don't know what it's going to be sometimes, but this is
always with love and respect.
We might even have a segment on the show. It's like, is that your phone burning up over there, Ethan? That could be Bomani just watching, texting you.
So I will say this right fast for those of you who don't know Ethan that well. As Ethan has evolved, I talked to one friend of ours who knows some other people, and another person was in the course of a somewhat similar evolution. And I was like, hey, what's going on with him? He was like, no, I think Ethan just sees things going on and doesn't think they make sense. This other guy's a lost cause. And that distinction was very, very helpful. I bet you can guess who I'm talking about.
The funny thing is I can't, but I'll think about it and I'll try to make a guess and I'll text you that guess later. But I just try to think out loud over here, try to not be mimetic, try to be my own individual as you do as well, sir.
Just don't like some of the people you be hanging out with.
We will invite some of those people on too, Bomani.
Yeah, you can invite them, but some of them I ain't trying to be around. Like, that's my only thing is I'm like, damn, like I feel like somebody's parent. Like son, these friends of yours, I just don't know. I feel like they taking you the wrong path.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. I think I've conveyed an ability to have my own thoughts and opinions regardless of the
You
company
have.
that I keep.
You have.
So,
You
but
have.
thanks so much, man. Really appreciate it. Would love to have you back on.
Thank you
Sounds
so
good,
much,
man. You
Bomani.
have a
Have a
good
great
one.
day. Thanks.
All right, man. You guys be
As
good.
always.
Thank you, man.
Okay.
That was
Sometimes I forget I'm hosting a show, Trace. I just
That's
forget
wild.
sometimes.
You know, I watched one time an interview you did with him on House of Strauss, maybe, where you asked him a question about how he felt after a podcast, if he was tired after talking, right? Wasn't that you and him?
Yeah.
And he was like, "No, I just feel like I've been on a phone call with somebody," because he's just got such a,
Oh.
he has just a. And then I think you said maybe sometimes you're tired afterwards.
Not this one. This is a little bit more energizing. I can't fast forward to actually know what it's going to be in the
Right.
future and what
Of
my
course.
energy level is going to be. I know all of you out there really care
Of
about my
course.
energy level post podcast.
Well, we want to keep it up. We want to keep the
Okay,
energy
okay.
level up. I mean, Bomani brings it. It's like crazy.
He's
Anyway, we're moving along because now we got to get to a brand new segment. Ethan and I were thinking about segment title names, and we're just thinking about something that could catch all the craziness that kind of goes on in the world. So we came up with an idea for a segment called HR, Not HR. Why don't you explain what that is, Ethan, what the idea is?
Oh, I will explain it with
Loosely.
relish. With relish. So sports is a bit of a dirty business. It's show business, but it's even more, I don't want to say meritocratic than show business, but there is an element of objectivity. You can either dunk or you can't dunk. You can either be a 6'5" guy who runs 4.4 at the 40, or you can't. And so there's a tolerance for, let's say, a range of behaviors that might get you in trouble or fired if you were, say, working at Yelp like I used to work. So I think that I like this concept of, can the sports world digest somebody's, shall we call it, idiosyncrasies, if I could pronounce that in a non-drunk fashion. And I like looking at some of these scenarios and going, is this a situation where this person can still work at this establishment? Is this a situation where this person has to have HR called in to at least have a conversation? I think we have a good example, though, Trace. You
Well,
wanna
to
set
that
up?
point, one of the things that set the example for us was a clip of Rob Gronkowski talking about Aaron Hernandez.
Okay.
I heard stories about like him being in the team meeting room, like beating off and like doing crazy shit.
I mean,
And honestly, if you don't want to talk about, it, we don't have
possibly
to.
that's a possibility. That one, I may or may have not seen it live.
So, Ethan, it may be up to you to explain to the audience who are maybe sports fans, they aren't sports fans, about this term beating off. Is that some sort of football term?
I didn't know that you were going to go there. I thought you were saying, hey, could you explain who Aaron Hernandez is to the audience?
I don't even think that matters.
Player.
He's so crazy that it might not matter.
Yeah, he might be a mainstream enough guy, given what happened in murdering in his off-the-field activities, going to prison, committing suicide, having miniseries and all these things made about him. But he was so good as a football player that Bill Belichick, he did not get involved when a thing such as that.
So when you're jacking off in front of a team, 40, how many people are on a football team, an NFL team? 50, 60, 70?
53-man roster at least. Yeah,
You're in a room with 50 men and some coaches and you're just jerking off?
I mean, the crazy thing about
it's not,
it,
even porn people can't perform like that.
well, the crazy thing about it, Trace, is that he's not the first great football player to even do that. Charles Haley, the legendary defensive edge rusher who played for the Niners, played for the Cowboys back in the 90s, he was also famous for doing that. He would just do that. And I remember Bill Parcells said that football is not for the well-adjusted. I think it speaks to that, but it also speaks to, there are not many jobs where you can do that absent repercussion. And that's just the sort of crazy world that sports happens to be. But I believe we have
okay, so that just sets up our first segment of HR, not HR.
Beautiful. Okay. I love it.
What
Our nice
about
little
one
clip.
thing we haven't? It's
Oh.
slightly related to that, but how about Millie releasing the files in Argentina about Hitler going out there.
Yeah,
You see
isn't that
that?
wild? Is that confirmed that Hitler did go lived in he
There's
survived?
a ton of German Nazi stuff in Argentina.
Oh yeah, Tim Kennedy went down there for
Yeah.
a television show called Finding
Finding
Hitler.
Hitler.
Yeah,
I remember that.
You go down there, they have Oktoberfest.
Yeah.
There's towns where they all wear lederhosen and they all fucking speak German. You're like,
But we also
yo.
know that there was at least 5 or 6 Hitlers.
Oh my God. I should probably give some exposition to that, but I'm stuck on 5 or 6 Hitlers. I would assume he is referring to the idea of stunt doubles for safety.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
Sacha Baron Cohen's The Dictator, but it just sounds funny, like a barbershop quartet. The 4 Hitlers, I guess if it's a quartet.
I mean,
that is Aaron Rodgers, future Hall of Fame NFL quarterback, now into his 40s. And he is on Joe Rogan talking about all manner of thing. And he has not signed with an NFL team yet. And I know the Steelers are a rumored landing spot for him. And indeed, Matt LaFleur, the former coach of Rodgers, went on a podcast and said that he expects Aaron to land on the Steelers. So I look at that right there. That's not the kind of not Aaron Rodgers. I should be very clear with my Aaron right there. Aaron Hernandez is wanking it in the meeting. That's more of, can the Steelers digest a quarterback who is so out there and talking in a way, Trace, that quarterbacks don't tend to? You're an organization man.
I never actually this never crossed my mind, even as thinking about this. NFL teams HR person, that must be a doozy of a job.
You're either doing everything or doing nothing is how I view how I view that particular
right.
job. They usually have something that's more a little bit like they call him the wolf in Pulp Fiction, who just cleans up messy matters. You know, I'm looking at what was discussed on this podcast. I will admit to the audience that I did not listen to the entirety of that podcast. I listened to a few different clips. A Jets fan listened to it in case they mentioned the Jets. And this is just to give a sense of the wide-ranging, since Joe Rogan is the leitmotif of this particular episode, of what was discussed. Frog embryos, Iraq Sesame Street, Diddy trial, Kamala was at a Diddy party, Epstein, Israeli mall kiosk, I should say, COVID vaccines, nanobots and vaccines, frequency that brings particles together and is a tracking device, pyramids, George Soros, UFOs, horse-based medicine, cars run on water, Amish kids don't have autism, Robert Kennedy on fluoride and toothpaste, Canada's 51st state, Chinese solar-powered inverters, Olympic doping, lead in gasoline, Biden, Harris earpiece during debate, if RFK had a normal voice, he'd be president, crisis actors, MK Ultra mind control. Now, I am not...
As one does.
I'm not
these
judging
are all things that I have talked about in my life, but not in just one sitting.
Yeah, if I had a nickel for every time I heard that exact topic combination, folks. Yeah.
So are you coming down? I'd like to know right now, is this an HR or not an HR problem having Aaron on your team?
I am not offended by the things Aaron Rodgers talks about. The media, and I'm saying that in this generalization, legacy media got so insanely angry at him in 2021, I believe, when he said he wasn't taking the vaccine. That seemed very much a COVID time. And I don't share their anger towards Aaron Rodgers. I don't share it. Yet, if I was running the Steelers, it wouldn't be so much the content of that rich tapestry that was being woven by Aaron Rodgers and Joe Rogan. That wouldn't be the problem. It's just, I think his great sin for me is that he doesn't care that much about football right now. I don't think that's his primary subject of interest as his skills have waned. If he was still slinging it like he was slinging it 5 years ago, then I don't care that he doesn't care. But at this point, I might need a little bit more of an outward conveyance of buy-in. So as an HR matter, I would not be sending the W whatever that they send to the players that they signed to have an NFL contract. I think we would have to go in a different direction. Maybe not on the strength of the Rogan episode alone, but that would be a factor in my thinking. Yes, indeed, it would be.
Okay, well, let's go to another guest and ask them.
Oh. Mike Pesca of the
Ask-
Gist. Mike Pesca of the Gist. This is how I professionally introduce people. I get
Unmute yourself, Mike. And we can ask Mike. I mean, has he ever experienced any kind of Nazi talk like that at NPR or Slate, just around the water cooler? Just some basic.
Yeah.
You know,
Does anybody doubt the provenance of the pyramids of Egypt over in public radio? We know they've got other wacky beliefs, but what about that one?
I'll tell you a joke. Guy goes down to Argentina and he's in a bar and he sees a guy across the way from him and he looks exactly like Hitler. And he goes up to this guy and he says, "Excuse me, are you Hitler?" These are how conversations go in bars in Argentina. And the man, I mean, he's got the mustache, he's short, the haircut, goes, "Yes, I am. And this time I am going to kill 6 million Jews and 4 acrobats." And the guy says, "What the hell's with 4 acrobats?" And Hitler turns to Ava Braun and says, "See, nobody cares about the Jews." It's odd. I could have come up with a joke about any one of those topics that Aaron Rodgers was talking about. Horse medicine. I got a lot of horse medicine. What is horse? Do you think that was the ivermectin?
I think so.
Rogan is still holding on to that. That's the thing that's the thing that radicalized him away from Bernie. You mocked me for using ivermectin and calling it horse medicine.
You know, and in fairness, I do think it became this stigmatized summation to not interface with what he was saying because everybody's playing this PR game. So it became he took horse paste or whatever because that sounds terrible. Ivermectin might have done nothing as far as, I don't know, alleviating COVID. I haven't looked into it. I'm not an expert on that, but I'm not into the vaccine topic like they're into the vaccine topic. I tend to think that ivermectin.
And yet somehow you know a lot more about it. So
No,
somehow you're more informed.
I don't know. There are things. There are some issues where I don't want to condescend to them because I haven't looked into it, but it just doesn't feel true. I just go, I don't know if I buy that. I haven't looked into the Egyptian pyramid topic, but I think that the Egyptians just built those pyramids. That's just how I feel.
The stakes at this point, 3,000 years later, do seem a little less dire. I do want to. Can I just go back to the whole one of the things Bomani was saying about
whatever
Stephen
we
A.
want,
Smith?
man.
Which it's I suppose a fun idea, and he's good at communicating, quite good at communicating is Stephen A. Smith. And the leap from, and Donald Trump didn't have many qualifications and he was good at communicating in an incendiary way and therefore he's president. So Stephen A. Smith has a real shot at this. I find really, really, really far-fetched, but I understand why people would play it as a parlor game. But one of the things we do is say, since Donald Trump won, it shows that no rules apply. There is no gravity. And just as a tangible example of something Bomani said. And by the way, I also love beignets and Cafe Du Monde and chicory in my coffee and all that. Bomani's a very smart guy.
Sure.
But scandals. There are no scandals. Why? Because Donald Trump wasn't touched by scandal. There have been so many scandals. Do we remember Madison Cawthorn? Do we remember George Santos? Do we remember Mark Robinson, the lieutenant governor of North Carolina with nude Africa? There were still just as many scandals. Scandals touch just as many people. Ask Bob Menendez and his gold bars. Just that the scandals that would normally attach themselves to someone like Donald Trump didn't. This doesn't mean that to be the most Trumpy is especially how a Democrat's going to win. I don't think. Although, did you see, Ethan, when Stephen A. had on Ben Shapiro to talk about the presidential pardon of the supposed or advised presidential pardon of Derek Chauvin? Did you see that episode?
I did not see that episode, Mike. Tell us what happened.
So they heard each other out. And to me, it wasn't extremely enlightening. I'm very familiar with all the details of the case, but that's fine. I know the audience isn't. What I was interested in, and also I don't think it was emphasized enough that this was a parlor game. I think I might have used that phrase with Stephen A. Smith, but a presidential pardon on the federal level does nothing for Derek Chauvin's freedom, who's in jail on mostly state charges, also federal charges, but won't get out for decades, even if it gets a federal pardon. But I looked at the comments and people loved it. And I assume these were mostly Stephen A. Smith listeners, viewers, people not predisposed to like Shapiro. But the people had this, they definitely had this yearning for just a fairly high-minded, I'm going to hear you out conversation.
Yeah.
And maybe I exist in too exalted a world, like you guys said, NPR. I hear those conversations all the time. So I don't know if it's we want Stephen A. Smith, we want Stephen A. Smith and Ben Shapiro to get along, or most of our media diet is so contentious when there is any sort of break in that. And that's what Joe Rogan is a little. He's not doing 3-hour interviews where you're grilling someone. He's meeting people where they are, wherever they are. And
Yes.
people like that. By the way, I think so 2 more things. And here I am filibustering.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter if you get a liberal Joe Rogan, if the Democratic candidate won't go on Joe Rogan or won't go on the liberal Joe Rogan. Like, you got to do the show, right?
I love that.
Yeah.
The liberal Joe Rogan has to be able to go on Joe Rogan. That's the point at which, like was said, that's the moment Donald Trump became president. That's the moment you became liberal Joe Rogan, when you appeared on Joe Rogan.
And the Democratic candidate has to do your show and Theo Von's show and Joe Rogan's show. And then
what if you're what if you're so rhetorically persuasive in that situation that you then convert Joe Rogan to liberalism and he goes back to becoming the liberal Joe Rogan? This is
You probably could be, as long as Dave Smith's not sitting there next to him, keeping his gravitational pull.
I mean, to what you're saying about the scandal, I think it's a little bit like back in the day, the degree to which scandal could take you out wasn't proportional to your fame necessarily. But now it's like the more famous you are, you're like this giant boat that can withstand being knocked into by another boat. That other boat is the scandal. If you're a small boat, if you're a Cawthorn, the scandal's just going to knock you out. But if you're just this big Trump, do we make it a yacht? Do we make it a Carnival cruise? You're just going,
make it a flying palace, make it a Qatari jet. Come on.
You need quite the iceberg in order to cause any issue there. So I think that's the thought process.
Well, here's another interesting point. So in New York, Andrew Cuomo was felled by scandal, and now he's going to be mayor. He's 89% in the prediction market's going to be mayor. And so that it would seem that confirms your point, but we never actually had the instance where he overcame the scandal.
No.
He's never even addressed the scandal. He never did that Stations of the Cross sit-down interview where you ask me any question and I'll come clean and then the people will forgive me. So I don't know if Trump taught him that. Trump taught everyone just deny, and counterpunch. It's not exactly Cuomo's playbook, but he's going to overcome scandal without anyone ever grappling with the scandal. That's a really interesting thing. You know what?
Didn't he say that his problem is he was too Italian? Am I making that up? Am I going to get sued?
It is true. I'm only half Italian, so I only half got him.
Cuomo is still Italian, though. I don't see how he is
Italian. This is what they're not saying. He's still Italian.
I mean, I want to make one point before I forget, though, because that's what we do here. I invite a guest on and I trample. That's what I do. I trample, folks. But I think there's a point to be made. I want this to come out correctly. This is a hard thing for me to articulate when it comes to Rogan and Rodgers and all that stuff that kind of sounds like a wacky rundown when I read the wacky rundown. In media culture, they regard something like that as freakish, and they regard Aaron Rodgers as a weirdo for a lot of the conspiracy-minded opinions that he has. Now, what I find interesting about it is that a lot of media people, my peers, are effete nerds who are kind of weird and weren't the cool people in high school and maybe were made fun of, but now have this cultural power on social media, and they have one lockstep opinion on things. And if you step outside of it, you're considered a weirdo. And they're pointing at Rodgers as a weirdo, but Rodgers' opinions, as weird as they might be, are the sorts of opinions that a lot of regular people have. There's this guy in my neighborhood. I'm going to say this because I don't think he's going to watch. He's not extremely online. He is a great guy. He is popular in the neighborhood. He is gregarious, handsome guy, I'll even say. And I know him and I respect him. And he thinks 9/11 was an inside job. And not only does he think 9/11 was an inside job, Mike, he acted like I was crazy when I didn't share that opinion. It was really? And he thinks the Maui fires were an inside job. And he thinks all sorts of things about electromagnetic rays. And if I were to do this profile and put it on the internet, all these people go, oh my God, what a weirdo. He's not a weirdo. Everybody likes him. He is far cooler than I am. So I guess what I'm saying is the cool people are weirdos. The average person has bizarre beliefs, and it's the upper middle class effete journalists who can barely carry a conversation without having some sort of neurotic pain of something. Those are the people who are, I guess, a version of normal. I don't even know what to call it.
Here's a theory. So listening to what you said, maybe it's more the case that the people who draw their status from an affiliation and a close affiliation with an institution, which is to say most mainstream journalists, are much less incentivized or much less allowed to deviate, right?
Yeah.
But an Aaron Rodgers, many people like him, dude in your neighborhood, draws their status. Guy in your neighborhood draws his status from being a great neighbor.
Yeah.
Aaron Rodgers draws his status not from, I mean, the institution he's affiliated with is not an opinion or intellectual institution. It's the Green Bay Packers, or just the greatness of himself as an athlete. So we not only countenance those weirdos, we kind of like them when the stakes are, when what they're doing and what they're trying to appeal to doesn't have anything to do with the actual opinion itself. It's pretty harmless for that guy to have his 9/11 opinions, though I probably wish he wouldn't. And I think we all know people who are on the spectrum of anti-vax. And I have a friend who wouldn't vax her kid, and it caused her a lot of problems, and she eventually got on board. But I would never, I mean, I wouldn't want them to work for the National Institutes of Health, but I would never think less of them as a mother or in any kind of context outside of that specific issue. And I think we do that that's how we act with people. So when someone goes on Rogan, he's funny, he's a wild card, that actually adds to his appeal. But if you're, working for the Athletic or the New York Times or aspire to work for such an organization, you can't quite have that. You can't allow for that deviation.
Yeah. I think
Ethan, if I might, just for 1 second, a slight correction. The idea that your neighbor is not going to see this, you really haven't put much thought into the algorithm, because it is going to find him.
Oh, because of what we're talking
about.
Right.
9/11. You're talking about 9/11.
Maybe it will be edited
You're talking about good looking.
Yeah, maybe it will be edited into the always iterative small change documentary. Is that thing still going on? Is that thing still being added to? The temperature of tensile steel when it melts. This is something I needed to know sometime around 2009.
Yeah. I mean, my neighbor, he's got some anti-tech views that would be regarded as healthy. If I am watching a 49er playoff game with him and I'm on my phone, he yells at me and he'll throw the phone across the room, not that viciously, but playfully, saying, we need to be here, we need to be present. So there's just something to me so ironic about people with views that we view as harmful in media or disinformation, or, oh my God, the internet is making people into whatever. But people with these views are sometimes living in a way that is admirable and is better than the way I might live my life in miniature, in small scale. Now, to what you're saying, Mike, about how it's a problem when your currency is your view. I think one of the reasons why these journalists got so angry at Aaron Rodgers, and I would like to disabuse them of this, they fear the athlete as mimetic model. They fear their
that's what they would always say. Yes. If he does it. And they were also specifically mad at him because he didn't, and I think you said this earlier, when he said he didn't get the vaccine, obviously he never said that, right? What he said was, I'm immunized. Because, he relied on natural immunity. You could maybe make the case if he came out and said, I didn't get the vaccine, it would have been a shit show. So he had to say something like, I'm immunized. And
They kind of made him lie, but he's also insufferable too at times. Although I don't hate him. There's a lot going on with Aaron Rodgers. I just don't subscribe to this idea. I understand that athletes are mimetic models and people admire them, but I think the media collective should chill a little bit and worry a little less and not pressure these guys into just reflecting whatever the journalists at these legacy institutions think should be the optimal viewpoint. I think that we need to add or at least we need to accept a little more capaciousness of opinions and accept that not everybody's going to have the same opinion. And once you try to control it and bully everybody into having the same opinion, I don't think it works too
Yeah.
well. I
Another
don't think it's great.
a really good example of that was Kyrie Irving, because Aaron
Yes.
Rodgers was breaking the rules that were in place for everyone on every team. Kyrie Irving was playing in the one jurisdiction where he himself wasn't allowed to play, but others, opposing teammates would come into Brooklyn and they'd be able to play because they were just passing through. There was no sense to it, and very, very few people in the media were saying, think of what you want of Kyrie, and maybe in the past he also has some odd Bubba Hotep type ideas, but this one is a little more illogical than Aaron
Yes.
Rodgers. This is maybe on de Blasio and New York City as much as it's on Kyrie.
Yeah, I defended Kyrie at that time and just said this was arbitrary and that he should be able to play. The rules are crazy. And there are people who really back then who I don't even think hold those views now, but back then they were really activated in journalism who went after me for it. And I couldn't see, I don't have to believe everything he believes. I don't have to care about everything he cares about, but it was an arbitrary situation. I believe that he has civil liberties. Mike, because we went really long with Bomani, is it possible, Trace, that we can have Mike on when we take questions?
Yeah, for sure. I was just going to suggest that. Do you guys
I'll
want
be
to take
quiet.
some questions
recede to the
together and get
background.
the whole gang in here?
Yeah, because I want these questions from these people.
Yeah. That's exactly the way
These
I'm feeling.
offenders, are we kind of trying to come up with a name for them?
Well,
in
they
essence?
could be first-time offenders or repeat offenders or whatever. I think that they could be. Could we play our? We have this segment is called "Beat the Press" because we want them to come here and outfox the system.
Beat the press. Reminds me of Aaron Hernandez in team meetings.
To be fair, that was probably just a tight ends meeting, not the whole 53. Don't you
Okay.
think?
I mean,
Yeah,
I
a
don't
little
know.
more intimate.
This is a wild boy.
And here we have
Ah,
Steve Marsh. Look at that.
hello. Hey, Steve, how you doing, man?
Kind
Nice. You are our first question asker. I know it's a
Tough
tremendous,
NBA morning.
tremendous honor for you, sir. What do you got for
Wow.
us?
Well, I don't know. In terms of like media stuff, we're kind of getting scolded up here in Minneapolis for even questioning the referees, like complaining about the referees so much after watching Shea Alexander get every call possible as he drives the basketball to the hoop. We're down 2-0 now.
Yep.
And there's something just unethical about the way this guy plays. Like, I don't know, like the greats of the game, whether it's Messi in soccer or Michael Jordan, like you don't see them flop or dive, like you wouldn't. Shea is obviously good enough that he doesn't need to do this. And then on the other end of the court, our best player, Anthony Edwards, has not been getting calls at the rim all year long, even though he takes a lot of contact. And it's because he plays ethically. He doesn't flop, like you have to exaggerate getting touched in order to get calls. The kind of like concept of a star whistle. It's like, okay, like how many dues does he have to pay in order to finally get a so-called superstar whistle where you're going to get calls when you're getting mugged at the rim? Why do refs reward unethical players like Shea Alexander while penalizing guys who don't flop, who take a lot of contact and don't get the calls? Like, why are these referees such marks?
There has been an issue with credulous reffing for a long time. If I were a Wolves fan, I think I would be more frustrated with Caruso and Dort on the Thunder playing a style of defense that I've not seen before. And here's the problem, though, folks, with capture, not audience capture, but institutional capture. I really have liked my interactions in the past with Sam Presti and have so much respect for what he's built that I can feel myself hesitating to give my objective take as I watch these games and say what's in my head, which is that I don't understand when the NBA puts out a clip and it's about how Alex Caruso is unscreenable. And it just looks like he's jumping into Anthony Edwards and bear hugging him. And I understand that in the playoffs, you let more contact go, but this seems a little bit much. Now, to what you're saying, this whole grifting thing is that's what people call it, right? Grifting, when people flop to try to get calls.
I mean, his nickname is the Foul Merchant.
Or the grift god is another term for Shea Gilgeous-Alexander I've seen.
Should be the foul monger, since
the
he
foul
collects them
monger
rather than gives them away, right?
Yeah, he's not selling the fouls, but that's how the youth talk. Now it's interesting because Anthony Edwards is
selling it though. He's selling it to the ref. Like when you get touched on the shoulder or get touched on the chin and you go like this, you know,
can we blame soccer for that?
I mean,
yes.
Ethan, I know Ethan would like to.
But Messi still doesn't do it. Some people don't have to dive.
So this might be a generational chasm. And Anthony Edwards, the reason he resonates is because he's young, but he's very old school. Because I saw an interview with Jared McCain of the Sixers. He's very young, player in his early 20s. And he couldn't even understand the issue people might even have about flopping and grifting and tricking the ref.
Right, sure.
I think the young, and a lot of the guys on the Thunder are young, but the young, they look at it the way young people do about hacking the algorithm. What's wrong with hacking the algorithm? That's just what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to manipulate the situation to your own advantage. So we might look at this and have a certain generational gap where we find this to be offensive, we find this to be dishonorable, we find this to be wrong. And some young people are looking at it and they're going, I don't even understand what the problem is. You do what you should do according to the rules and manipulate as you should manipulate. And
it's why Donald Trump is so popular with young men, right? He's like,
it's why he's so good at basketball, Donald Trump.
Well,
Nobody's
saying,
better at basketball than Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Paying your taxes is for stupid people, right?
I mean, I think
why play by the rules? Like the rules are made to be bent.
I think, and hey, Gilgeous-Alexander, he's what, 30 now? So maybe my whole theory on this is a little bit overdetermined or a little bit overworked. But
26.
The onus,
I think Trump
26.
I don't know for sure. I would guess Trump has a negative wingspan. I think there are two players in the NBA. Tyler Hero's one has a negative wing. I think Trump might. I'm going to look into it.
JJ Redick.
This is a criticism of some of the greatest, like Anthony Edwards. They say he has small hands. Dante Culpepper, small hands. Donald Trump also famously small hands.
Yeah, it's look, man, Mike, what do you think about this? What do you think about the grave injustice being done to our friends in the upper Midwest, in service of our friends in the plains? What do you think? Is this unfairness, or did the Oklahoma City Thunder just have an amazing defense? Steve is a total whiner, crybaby, poor sport, and he's just not accepting that Shea Gilgeous is getting mauled out there. And it's disgusting, and thank God the NBA enforces the rules.
I think any tax expert will tell you get more of what you incentivize. And so that's what's going on. You've incentivized this as the foul. I think SGA is such a dynamic and creative player that if he stopped getting that foul, I don't think his lethality would go down. I think part of the reason why, just like Harden, part of the reason why he launches himself as a defender is he knows he's going to get the call. And the thing about Caruso, I would say, is everyone who had eyes knew what this guy was as a defender. Right. He's one of the two best defenders in the league. You don't ask him for anything else. He'll give you plus minutes all the time. It was amazing on Chicago. And to fold him into the OKC, a lot of other teams had a chance to do that. So they get his abilities now.
Yeah. It's
all right. Well, thank you very much for the call, Steve. We appreciate it.
Great show, Ethan. Rooting for you, bro.
Thanks so much, Steve. Good luck in the Western Conference Finals, man.
Thank you. We need it.
Yep. Okay, we're going out now to Ryan.
All right. Thank you very much for including me here. I've been taking notes during the call because so many topics. One, Ethan, thank you so much for introducing me to two-way.
Oh.
There was an interview, I think, gosh, way back now. But anyways, you brought me to this platform, and I'm forever grateful at this point. Loved Bomani's sweatshirt, Cafe du Monde, a favorite. And also love seeing you on Guy Haberman's podcast very recently. Anyways, Rogan on the left. He was pro Bernie at one point. Why do we forget that?
I think some have made that point that Joe Rogan used to be the liberal Rogan, but continue, sir.
Yeah, just like I have a thought that he can swing back. To me, he is a version of a swing voter that the Democrats should be looking to pull back. And then the conversation about young men. We're in this situation where Democratic leaders are passing away as we speak.
Yeah.
And I think it's a conversation about succession planning. Like if you are a corporate leader in a Fortune 500 company, that is your consistent concern. And then anyways, I could go deep on that. I did want to bring up a couple of sports topics that were brought up. A-Rod to the Steelers. I think it's a mistake for them.
Yeah.
If they do that, I'm a 49ers fan, and our huge mistake last season was not signing our players early enough and bringing them into training camp. I think it's the same situation here with A-Rod. And then what I haven't heard you talk about today is the draft lottery. Conspiracy theories around the draft lottery. I just want to hear about that.
Yeah, Bomani would have been good at that because he is just so disgusted by people believing in the conspiracies, and he thinks that it's totally idiotic. And yet Shaq was recently on Gilbert Arenas' podcast, and it's always so fun when the people inside are the biggest conspiracy theorists, and they just seem to think the NBA is rigged. And I mean, they're a little bit wacky with their opinions. Having worked in the NBA, therefore corrupted, right? I don't think it's rigged. I think it would be impossible to rig. I think they could do it in a way that looks more on the up and up, but they're stuck with this problem where the more you deny, the shadier it looks like. When they start saying that, well, come on, the draft lottery has been guaranteed by, what's that accounting firm? Does anybody remember? It's not
Merrill. Is it Deloitte and Touche? Is it? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. Cooper Draper Price. I can't remember what the accounting firm is, but that doesn't assure anybody of anything. That doesn't mean anything to anybody. Yeah. So I think they could do the lottery in a way that looks more like a lottery. I've got this vague memory of when I was a kid where you'd see the ping pong balls bouncing around and they believe it more, because I don't think they're competent enough to rig it. And I don't think that they could have I don't think they mapped it all out that, oh my God, Luka is going to be traded to the reward the Mavericks with the #1 pick. I just think it had a roughly 2% chance of happening. And events that happen 1 out of 50 times can happen sometimes. And you can call me naive. You can call me an unfun guest if I was ever put on Joe Rogan's podcast, because I think the pyramids were actually built by the Egyptians. But that's just how I see it.
Is the case that they rigged it not so much a pro Mavericks case, but a pro let's do anything to get Luka with LeBron and prolong LeBron's
it's
career?
It's the long
case?
game. It's many-dimensional chess is what Adam Silver is playing there.
Well, thanks a lot for checking in, Ryan, and all the kudos to Two-Way, the mighty Two-Way as we refer to it now. And
thanks, Ryan.
Hopefully we'll see you again soon.
Remember when Bernie went on Rogan, much of the left had a conniption because Rogan was supposedly anti-trans. And so this was a time when I think that was a lot more salient in the party, but that was also a thing.
Yeah, it was. People forget how crazy things were in the very recent past. Not that things are saying now, but they were crazy in a particular way back then. Do we have
we got another call. We're going to Jack Long.
Oh. Hey,
hello.
Got me?
Yes.
Yeah, we got you.
All right. So a couple things. The NHL actually now does a live draft lottery where they have the actual ping pong balls and they do like live odds on the ping pong balls as they come out.
I think that would be more believable, but you'd never put it past people to be able to concoct something, even when seeing how.
Yeah, it's always going to be a conspiracy.
Yeah.
But the question I have for you is, so, long, and I longtime subscriber, but I remember you saying you didn't like hockey because it was so random.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was wondering, if it was so random, why are the same? It seems like the same Florida teams, my Panthers included, tend to be getting into the Eastern Conference Finals all the time.
Oh, I get to come up with some sort of BS theory. This is my favorite. My sort of stone to explain something complicated that I am utterly unqualified to weigh in on. I love this sort of thing. My theory is that hockey is a little bit random. There is that line from the West Wing that the goals seem accidental, but maybe pressure matters and it actually negatively impacts the teams that are under the most scrutiny. And so if you're in Florida on a professional hockey team, you're fine. Whatever happens, happens. It's cool. You're getting a check. You're in the NHL. You've got your status. But not many people in Florida are actually paying attention outside the Dan Le Batard show and maybe a few other transplants from other states who have some sort of connection to the game of hockey. But if you're a Canadian hockey team, oh my God. I remember there was that podcast that followed soccer. I was trying to remember what it was called. It doesn't matter. They were very
Men in
amusing
Blazers?
gentlemen. Yeah, you got it, Mike. Oh my God, what a pull right there. But they were saying that in England, those
Suboptimal.
jerseys, those shirts, that they were as heavy as chainmail, as heavy as metal. That's what a maple leaf sweater likely feels in the playoffs. So maybe that aspect is the not so random part, which is the perverse inverse correlation to how many people care about your team's performance and how that team performs under pressure. That's my crazy theory. No way of knowing if it's true.
Well, random doesn't mean that there aren't good teams, right? I mean, I'm an Islanders fan. They went on a 4-cup run, then the Oilers. Panthers are good. Not that they won the Atlantic this year, but they made a finals. They outlasted the Oilers.
They just don't care about the regular season at all at this point, and it's just let's just play dirty as hell and get to the playoffs, play dirty as hell, and I love it.
In hockey, with no home ice advantage, really, statistically, that's actually a good strategy. Eighth seed's not that much different from the number 1 seed.
Yeah.
Well, thanks a lot for calling in, Jack. We've got time for one more caller today.
Okay.
We're going to Aaron. Aaron.
Yeah, thanks.
So much
Can you guys hear me?
Yep. Yeah,
can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Oh,
We
great.
can, and we can see you, Aaron.
Oh, great. Thanks. Thanks so much
welcome.
for...
Let me just say really quickly, interrupt. Welcome to the Two-Way.
Yes, thank you. I've been a subscriber to Two-Way with Mark for a while, and actually even before then. It was great that you kind of went down the sort of Dallas path a little bit. I want to know what your perspective is on sort of Nico, assuming that he picks he's going to pick Flag. And then what you guys think of, there's a player coming out of China right now, Hang, Yangtze Hang, who's, very different, right? 7'1" handles like a 6'2" guard. I mean, he's just a freak. And I don't know if you guys have a take on him or not. And just how kind of there's an evolution of the game right now where it's really about this team construction model, right? Where you're trying to construct teams. It's almost like a hyper version of the Miami, 3 superstar construction model, but now like on steroids, where teams are looking to rope in 2, 3, 4 players and then make a hard run for maybe 2 to 4 years. And how do you think that's going to evolve the game? Because you're not going to see if this sticks, you're not going to see the incentives to have long contracts, because you don't want to get tied in. If your team doesn't make a run, then you're just a paperweight. And then one last quick thing, working in the large consulting industry space, E&Y, it's a $52 billion company that basically audits and runs and supports tens of thousands of companies. They are not going to be part of a fraud scam, which would send people to penitentiary, much less the CEO, for, no offense, a stupid NBA draft lottery, given the scale of their, responsibilities to the Fortune 10,000 around the world.
You don't think that's worth giving one NBA team a slight advantage over another NBA team in some grand manipulation of I don't even know what? Yeah, I would.
And the destruction of your public company and losing, basically 40 billion in revenue. Yeah, probably not.
Yeah, I can't. I can't imagine that would make a lot of sense, which is why
I don't know. Did Price Waterhouse take the hit after the La La Land debacle at the Oscars? You could take one hit. It's worth it once.
No, it's a little different. I mean, when you make a mistake in how in reading a card is different than throwing, because that's what it technically is, because this falls under gaming laws, right? So every state has fraud gaming laws. So now you're committing fraud. And then of course it's across the state line. So now it's wire transfer fraud, now it's federal. Like, dudes are doing time now.
Yeah. I don't think it's worth the risk. I don't think the NBA draft lottery is rigged. I tend to think if there are improper influences sometimes, I think smaller scale. There are all these people going, the NBA wants the Oklahoma City Thunder to be the face of the league, and that's why they're screwing the Wolves. And I think to myself, maybe the Thunder are just more annoying in the clips they send to the league and really whipping votes in that way behind the scenes, and the squeaky wheel gets the grease if there is something of influence happening. Now I'm thinking about the variety of things you said. Now I haven't really gone down the rabbit hole on the player out of China, but that player matters significantly if the player hit. And I think that this has been an underrated component in the friction between the NBA and China, because when Yao Ming came about, it was assumed that this was the future. And not only were there all these people in China who are now huge NBA fans, but there were going to be all these players coming over from there, and it was going to unite the world, and it was going to make the NBA tens of billions of dollars, and it really accelerated the globalization of the sport. And it was amusing to me. It was amusing to me that the NBA went so into internationalization, and it was like one of these monkey paw kind of wishes where the genie fulfills the wish in a way you didn't want, where David Stern and Adam Silver go, oh, please make our game global. Please make our players international. And the genie says, yes, I will do that. Here are your MVP level superstars from Slovenia, from Serbia, and from Greece. And that's what happened. They didn't come over from China. Indeed, there is no player in the NBA from China. And that makes this sport less interesting to China in the top-down way that they are being run. So when they were offended by Daryl Morey, then GM of, I believe, yes, the Rockets, doing Houston, a free Hong Kong meme, when the nation of China completely cut out the NBA and removed all their business, they had more incentive to do that because it's a nationalist country and their countrymen weren't performing in this sport. And I don't think there's so much enthusiasm from Xi and everybody else for making this a huge part of their national identity and tuning in to watch a bunch of Americans and Eastern Europeans. So this has been a real tough thing for the NBA. Adam Silver in 2019, I was at a press conference and he was lamenting the lack of a Chinese star, which was odd to me. He was talking about how they even want to help their Olympic team, which was strange to hear from an American. So I think the dearth of the Chinese player has adversely impacted the relationship between the NBA and China. It's something that Adam Silver desperately wants to happen. And so I'll say this much. If that guy's good, he's going to get a chance. He's going to get some people behind the scenes pulling for him. And I'm trying to remember, what's Nico going to do with Dallas? He's going to get Flag and team building. I'm not sure. Nico's maybe not the greatest GM, I think. So I don't know what he's going to do.
Well, that sounds like a good spot to end this. We're running out of
Nico Harrison.
We're running out of
gentlemen.
road
There we go. Yes.
Anyway, hey, thanks a lot, Aaron, for being a fan and chiming back in on all the two-way stations. That's about it, guys. I mean, that's a pretty good episode 1, but we're running out of time down in the master control switch. It's like so. And I'd also like to say thanks, Mike, for coming in and riding shotgun with you at all. And next week, everybody turn in. We got Ryan Duffy. He's going to be here talking about his Untold series, Shooting Guards, which is going to be pretty exciting. Some more NBA talk and guns and what have you and stuff like that. And thanks for tuning in for the very first episode of Random Offense.
Thank you so much, everybody. Really appreciate it. Thanks, audience. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Bomani. Thanks, Trace. Thanks to all of you at 2A. See you, folks.
Cool. If you're out tonight, don't forget, be exactly who you want to be.